Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Black Mental Health Matters. I'm drkerryann Williams, and on today's show, I'm going to be speaking with Melissa Alexis. She is the founder and CEO of Cultural Fabric, which is an applied mindfulness consulting company. So, if you're interested in listening to her or hearing her story, then keep watching.
So, hello, everyone, and welcome back to Black Mental Health Matters. I'm drkerryann Williams. I'm a psychiatrist practicing here in Massachusetts, and this is a talk show that's about everything related to mental wellness in the Black community. So if you ever want to give us a call or ask a question during the show, you can give us a call at 617-238-7111. This is also going to be streaming live on Facebook. And the Facebook page to go to is heat981fm.com. So hope you'll join us on Facebook as well. Well, guys, if you've been listening over the last few weeks, you know that I've had a kind of a bit of a series on holistic mental health. I had Dr. Portia Lee, who's a naturopath, and I had last week Ava Laura, who runs Ava Laura's Healing Center, and she specializes in a variety of holistic strategies. And so today on the show, I have a guest with me, Melissa Alexis, who has a background in fine arts and brings a different perspective to holistic mental health. So let me introduce her to you. Melissa Alexis is the founder and CEO of Cultural Fabric. And Cultural Fabric is an applied mindfulness consulting company, and it innovates specialized interventions for holistic well-being and leadership. And she launched Cultural Fabric in 2016, developing frameworks to integrate mindfulness and racial healing, mental wellness, embodiment, and leadership development. In 2018, she designed and launched a signature program called the Healing Arts Institute, which is a certificate program for embodied leadership and social transformation. And she is committed to helping people connect ideas and solutions across sectors to move racial equity and well-being from theory to practice. She graduated from Amherst College with dual degrees in psychology and Spanish, and she earned her master's degree at Sarah Lawrence College. She's been on faculty at Sarah Lawrence College, Amherst College, and Bard High School Early College Network. She is a mindfulness and mental wellness specialist. She's a registered yoga teacher and a meditation guide with over 25 years of experience in business administration and program development. So a lot of experience that she brings to the table. I am so excited to have you on the show, Melissa Alexis. So welcome, welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So such an honor to be here.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background. I'm always interested to know what are some of the factors that led up to the work that you're doing now? Let's start there.
Thank you for asking that. It's so amazing. I feel like for all of us, sometimes, I know for myself, when I'm just in the throes of life and future looking, and I don't spend enough time looking back, to really, so I love looking back and understanding how everything I've done up until this moment has led me to what I do now, has led me to a sense of purpose. So not just what I've done, but who I am. So my parents are from Trinidad and immigrated to Boston in the 70s.
Hey, Trini.
Yeah.
Trini.
I still call it home, even though I was born in Boston. Trinidad is home as well. So, them immigrating to Boston and then leaving Boston during the 70s, during the busing incidents. We left in 1980, actually. They moved us outside of the city. And that would definitely have such a power in shaping my perspective. Looking back, I realized how much I missed and longed for that community. We were in Jamaica Plain, and then we moved to this predominantly white community. And so this feeling of loss and a sense of, okay, who am I in this context, took me through, throughout high school and through college. This idea of racial healing has been very present for me in my own life, in thinking about my own heritage and my upbringing and reconciling all of those things. And so it's beautiful to look back and realize how that journey has led me to integrating the work that I do now around racial healing. Um, Also, starting to dance when I was in high school. So right in ninth grade, my dance teacher, who I first started studying with, could still tell the story of how awful I was in the training realm, of these techniques, these American techniques. I had no experience. And so I trained, in ballet and tap and jazz all throughout high school and really connected with my body in a different way. But it wasn't until I went to college and I started dancing West African dance from Guinea, from Senegal, from Afro-Caribbean and South American dance from Brazil, Afro-Cuban dance, Afro-Haitian, that I really felt home in my body. It felt like a homecoming. And of course, I grew up listening to soca and dancing and going to carnival and all of that, but I didn't really understand the connection to Africa and to that sense of who we are, even if we don't have a way to verbalize it. So I connected with it without words, through dance. And so that sense of finding home in my body has been the thing that has led me from that moment, up until now. The reason why I keep integrating not just movement, but dance specifically, because in that I started to investigate, well, what is this feeling of home and how is this healing? And it really was such a healing for me to experience that movement. And now, throughout the years of research and realizing how much of intracellular healing there is, that there is encoded in dance and in these ancient traditions, ancestral traditions, both, the ones that come from Africa and also the ones that I've adopted, like yoga, there's encoded in it healing for us, something that speaks right to your cells and is therapeutic to your cellular structure. So for me, I'm so passionate about dance, and specifically African and African diasporic dance, remaining central to how we heal as Black people, because we definitely have to heal through our bodies. And I find that healing, and that's led me, to continue integrating the body in my work and to keep it central.
Wow, and that's really powerful because, as you mentioned that, I just think about how one of the legacies of history in the U.S., of course, and in other places, but here that we're in the U.S. with slavery, is this loss of the connection to the heritage, and so kind of regaining that through dance. They can take a lot of things away from us, but you can't take our genes, our the
That's
very
right.
fiber of our
That's
beings.
right.
You can't take that away, and so those are the things that are held and encoded. And you mentioned this kind of almost like an intracellular encoding of this in our body, that even though you grew up in the US, once you experience the Afro-Brazilian and Afro-Caribbean dancing, you're like, something about this feels right. Something
Yeah.
about this feels different.
Yes, and it's not about whether you're doing a step right, or it's not that. It's the rhythm and it's the frequency that speaks and gets right to your cells. The word resonance is about what you have in you. Like you couldn't resonate with it if it wasn't also in you. So just that resonance brings you to this frequency and brings you back, you know and it's so powerful. It's so powerful.
Yeah. And just thinking about how I want to say historically, some of these things like rhythm, beat,
Hmm.
dance, was also a kind of communication. So
Yes.
it communicated something using the body without using words historically. It was pretty powerful. And so we
Hmm.
carry that with us, which is
That's
why,
right.
we kind of feel it non-verbally.
That's right. And that's why I know it's the evidence from doing this with my own body and in my own healing. That's why I know that the nonverbal is so powerful. It's still communication, even when it's just you and or you listening to your music and dancing with yourself. You're communicating with your own cells, and in your own cells, you have over 132 ancestors living within you in your cellular structure. So you're getting that communication from your ancestral lineage as you communicate with that rhythm and through the body. And so, you know, a lot of my work is centered around this idea of, you know, really staying connected with the body, because it has its own intelligence and it has its information for us. And in a society, especially in America, but as you said, around the world too, you know, capitalism and the ways that we have trained ourselves or been trained and conditioned in education, it devalues our sense of what it devalues our sense of what the body. Can you still hear me?
I can still hear you.
Okay, perfect. It
Yeah, your video
okay.
has kind of been out and out, but your audio is perfect.
I fixed it. Okay, perfect. We live in a culture that devalues the body. So there's always this hierarchy of, you know, the brain or the mind being higher than. And so I think we come by it naturally because of our education and because of the ways that we've been entrained, that we disconnect from the body. And so this reconnection with the body, recommunicating, you know, awakening to that, to all that lives in our cells, is so important, because there's so much information and healing that the body has for us. And I always I awaken to this again and again. You know, I've been a dancer for a very long time. You know, 13 was a long time ago. So, and I'm still a dancer and an active choreographer, in addition to running this mindfulness-based practice. And so I'm always awakening again and again to this fresh awareness that, wait a minute, this body is the vehicle that we've been given to experience this life. Yeah. We actually can't experience anything without it. So we can be disconnected, you know, and go through life less conscious, or we can decide and come to some, you know, tools for how we can connect in and get more information, because there's so much. There's so much.
I like what you said. I think you worded it so well when you mentioned like this, increasingly this kind of hierarchy, where as civilizations kind of went on, the brain was more prized, intelligence and study and this sort of thing. And so it just was more valued than really what our body is doing and how does our body feel. And there's a lot of even emphasis on kind of like overriding what the body wants and kind of like
that's right,
forcing it into submission, like, you know, going into war. It doesn't matter if you're in pain, you need to keep fighting, you know, that kind of thing. And so this idea of, wait a second, let's kind of flip this and see what it's like if we do, instead of top down, let's try kind of bottom up, kind of going, starting with the body, seeing how that can also influence the mind, or at least trying to find a balance between the two. It's interesting to kind of think of it that way.
Absolutely. I mean, again, one of the things that makes me laugh is thinking about, well, wait a minute, the brain is housed by the body. You can't really do without this. You know, you can't do without this body. And I think, you know, it's what I love about Black culture. You know, Black culture around the world, that we are still so connected to our bodies. But there are ways, you know, I just keep on talking about, you know, our training and our conditioning, because there are ways that American culture, white dominant culture, you know, there are ways that we are influenced to disconnect. Yeah. But there's nothing more valuable to me than that mind-body connection. And in the ancestral lineages in Africa, in South Asia, the mind and body are one thing. So we tend to talk about them separately, but the paradigm is actually that the mind and body are one. And the third thing that we never, you know, in popular culture, I know we do, but, you know, in popular culture, we may not talk about, is the spirit. You know, so the mind body is one thing, and it's surrounded by, encased by spirit. And I'm really crediting my friend Uma, who's from India, in sharing that or like solidifying, crystallizing that paradigm of the mind body, you know, being really one. And that's my experience of it. You know, they're not separate. And so
that's an intangible thing.
Yes. It's definitely intangible, because the mind is not the same as the brain. You know, the mind is actually, you know, the thoughts that you think, and sometimes they're yours, but they're also can be of your ancestors. They can be of the collective. So all that's happening right now in the world is also influencing our minds. There's a collective mind. and a collective body. So think about that.
Sure.
We are a collective body mind.
And I like, you introduced that term collective, and it's one that we haven't spoken about on the show before. Is this the idea of the collective, the influence of the collective in how we think, and kind of what we say and what we do. Can you talk just a little bit more about that concept of like the collective for the body and the mind?
Well, I'll start back, since you have me thinking about the past and thinking about the way that I hold family, my family, and also that Trinidadian culture. That's a collective culture. That's a culture of the collective, of like, you party together, you eat together. We didn't have separate parties for generations. You had intergenerational parties. I know a lot of us share that. It's not unique to Trinidad. And so this idea of collective is seeded from Africa. It's seeded from the sense of us as circle. And so as we come again to this culture and we think about in America the ways that we've been conditioned around individualism, it can take us away, again, this false sense of separation from our sense, not just from each other next to each other. I know a lot of us are experiencing or have been experiencing that, and some of us are happy to be back together, or outside together. Yeah. But it in our minds, our awareness. So you asked me to talk about the mind body. So the body mind, there's something about our awareness that is really important in bringing something to life. That's what mindfulness is about. I define it as a state of heightened awareness, and Vietnamese Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh talks about it as it's always mindfulness of something. And so mindfulness of the collective, mindfulness of this collective body, that we are actually, as I breathe, I'm breathing in, even though you're miles away from me, I'm breathing the same air that you're breathing. We're recycling, so I can still sit here and see you digitally and be aware that I'm intimately connected with you. And so when I'm healing myself, it's not just for me, it's for my ancestors, it's for your ancestors, it's for all of us. And so in that way, our self-healing is intimately connected and inextricably tied to our collective healing. If we heal as a collective, we're healing individually. If we heal individually, we're healing as a collective. So for me, it's this sensation that our this boundary of my body, your body, is actually false too.
Well, it's funny. I don't know that I had really thought about it that way. And one of our listeners are kind of having the same experience as you mentioned, that our own healing is connected to the healing of the collective, and to think about that even as a factor as we think about whether or not to enter into the process of our own healing. Because a lot of times we're taught to be so individualistic, or my healing is for me.
Right.
If the things that have happened to me, they affect me, and the healing is about me. And to even just broaden that and to think, actually, when I get healed, it's much bigger than that. It actually does, influence more than I think.
Yes. It can. So, again, calling on, the ancestral traditions that are so much part of the frame of how I look at things. And I really credit our ancestors for that, for looking at what we are doing now, not just as what we're doing for this moment, but it influences, there's a belief system about it being able to influence the past and also influence the future. And so even in indigenous traditions in the United States, indigenous people look at 7 generations ahead. That what we're doing right now is for 7 generations to come. And for me, I really credit my understanding of this. Like I can really feel this in my body, mind, because I can, through dance, through yoga, through mindfulness, I can feel how the past, present, future is really like this. Again, it's not really separate, that we are interdimensional beings. We're living right now the resonances of our past. What's happening right now around so much pain in terms of racism, it's because of our past. And then we're also in this moment able to shape the future. So it's so powerful to realize that even that is a false sense of separation, that the past, present, future lives together in this moment. So yeah, we're doing a lot when we decide to step into our own healing. We're doing it, it's so important. It's so amazing.
Wow. And for for any listeners that are just joining us, you're listening to Black Mental Health Matters. I'm Dr. Carryann Williams, and today I'm speaking with Melissa Alexis, and she is the CEO and founder of Cultural Fabric, which is an applied mindfulness consulting company. But we've just been talking about her background and the role of dance and of healing in our own bodies and in the collective. And so if you have any comments or questions, you can give us a call at 617-238-7111. We're also streaming live on Facebook. So if you want to follow along on Facebook and drop a comment, or even if you just want to see us, you can go to heat981fm.com. That's the Facebook page, heat981fm.com, and you can follow along there. So, so tell us about Cultural Fabric.
So again, you have me thinking about the historical. So I'll tell you the historical, and then in the present moment. So I started Cultural Fabric when I was still working. I was working I've worked in many different sectors and fields, but I was working in arts education at the time at the Boston Ballet. And it was 2016, so height of, one of the first waves of Black Lives Matter movement. And I just thought, what am I doing? I need to be more activated. I already was. I was performing at, Black Lives Matter vigils and, feeling into the healing practice that way. But I really wanted to craft a sense of my lane in the activism that was around healing, and to be engaged in that way. And for me, it looked like initially in 2016, going into wherever we were, so community health centers and community centers and libraries, and teaching yoga, teaching African diasporic dance, teaching meditation, all of these tools that bring us right into connection with our body. And the way that I teach still is about really the sovereignty of us over our own body, mind, spirit, being able to utilize and understand, the tool of the body. I believe that we all have that innate capacity to come into that awareness and to understand what our body mind needs in order to guide our own healing. So I think of it as awakening the teacher within. So I would go into different sites to do that awakening work. And it evolved in 2018. That's when I stopped and created the Healing Arts Institute, because I realized that I was one person trying to run around to like 16 to 24 different sites. And there was a limitation to how much I, as one person, could do. And so I thought, how can we replicate this? Not replicate me, but replicate this healing. And so I embarked on creating this program that would give space for people to step onto their own healing path, but then also give space for people who were self-identified leaders to come into mindfulness-based practice and to take it with them in this way that, that they could be the healing presence at their job or at their, in their communities. And so since then, we're embarking on our 7th and 8th cohorts now. So we've had 6 cohorts of people go through the program, and the virtual experience this year has been interesting, but has allowed for people as far away as South Africa and Mexico to participate. So that's been really beautiful.
That's cool.
Yeah, that was really cool. But what I realized is that it's such an evolution. Like what is that program? What is that again? For me, I sort of have to always ask myself that too, because it depends on who's there and what is needed for people's individual healing, and then what we see is needed in the collective. So always, I've been involved in community engagement work since 1999. So always, it's not about what I think is needed. It's about what we think and see and feel and hear is needed. And so that is really emergent and evolves over time. So each cohort has been really different in that way, although they're lessons or learnings that I teach. But then there are ways that people really put, I like to say that it's kind of, I give a skeleton and then people who come in put the flesh on the bones. And it depends on, again, how you awaken to what you need and you awaken to what is needed in the world. And then that helps. My intention was for that to help us, create those ripples of change and transformation so that people can go out and create their own ripples of change and transformation. It's happening, it's definitely happening. And I'm just so thankful to my ancestors for just keep on, stepping me forward and helping me reveal what this process is. As I sat with a girlfriend a few weeks ago over Zoom, sat with her, as she was suffering with everything that's going on, all of the continued killings of Black people. She was really in a lot of pain. And I was talking about, the withdrawal that we can give ourselves permission, especially as Black people, to not re-traumatize and trigger ourselves by watching or, listening to things that, have that impact on us. And then also what is regenerative and restorative that we can give ourselves. So for me, these ancestral practices tell us one thing: we are already whole. And in a world that tells us that we, are fragmented, separated, have to be fearful, and maybe are feared, not maybe, are feared, but whether we have that experience or not, I'm not sure. But definitely in the collective, we have that experience. In that, in contrast to that, to come to practices that tell us we are already whole, we are already healed. It's just our coming into awareness of that healing and of that wholeness. And, in that conversation, and as I told her more about the Healing Arts Institute, she's a psychiatrist or a psychologist, excuse me. She said, this sounds like an intervention for oppression. And I was like, okay, each person who experiences it will give it different language. And I was like, yes, that is what we experience in that program. So coming back to, what is cultural fabric, it's about seeding and continuing to seed our wholeness and to do our healing from a BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, POC perspective, regardless of where we are. And to come into an understanding of what that means and how much I have to work with myself, with ourself, around what we've ingested, the conditioning we've ingested around white supremacy and how that still lives in me, or how that still lives in us. And so to put ourselves really central, it's work, it's continual uncovering of what we need in order to do that.
Yeah, I'm just looking at something that one of our Facebook users wrote. T says, yes, collective regeneration. This idea of regenerating and kind of doing the work together. And it seems, Melissa, like, once you had your own personal experiences, that you wanted to share this and kind of bring other people alongside you, and have them experience something, at least, if not the same, but at least parallel or similar to what you experienced, that kind of that awakening.
Yes, exactly. There's no one way to heal. There's no one healing path or healing journey. There's many, which is why in that program I focus on many, because it's up to how, again, that resonance in you, in your cells, it's up to how you experience what you experience. And so to your point, I had this meditation that I did years ago where I just had this vision pop up in me of myself walking along a pathway holding a lantern. And there were people with me, and we were walking toward this path together. And that is the vision, is just, I'm just holding up a lantern. I'm just trying to illuminate what I can and share what I can from my own journey. But it's not just from my own. Again, it's informed so much by the collective and by my ancestors, by our ancestors, that I can't even say my when I talk about it. Yeah.
I'm curious to know, like, the response that people give, like maybe even feedback or the things that people have said who have experience some of this. So, and also maybe to explain, so some of it is they're doing some of the dance, like that maybe Afro-Brazilian dance, or they might be doing yoga or various, depending on what they need. What kinds of interventions and things like that have you done with folks? And then what are some of their responses and feedback that they've given you?
Mm-hmm. So I'll sort of talk about the dimensions of, the ways that I work both in the Healing Arts Institute and then, this sort of parallel life that is living alongside of it. I subsidize the work by working within organizations. So in the Healing Arts Institute, the curriculum is very much about, as I said, there's no one healing path. So it's about exposing people to different ways of healing. So it might be dance, it might be yoga, meditation. The modalities that I don't specialize in, I have guest faculty who come in and not just share the healing modality, they share that for people's own self-healing practice, but they also share their story. So something about, our journey is so illuminating in healing and awakening for us too, to hear the different dimensions of other people's journeys. And so there's practice and there's also, what people feel that they want to focus on. So again, it's about leadership development, because I believe we're all leaders. So it's not about who has anointed you as leader, it's how you're anointing yourself and then how you equip yourself, to lead. And so this idea of being able to, come into a sense of mindfulness, as my spiritual mentor, Sadhguru, talks about, mindfulness and meditation is actually not something that you do. It's a state of being. Mm-hmm. And so once you come into that state of being, that's when you're really able to transmit that among other people, and when you're with people and when you're leading. So that's really the intention, is to activate that. And then the ways that people take on projects and start to practice something that they're going to lead in their community or their workplace, that is their own, they craft that themselves with my support, and then go out into the world and do that, and we stay connected as people go out into the world and do that. And so, since the creation of the program, I've had scholarships for this program. I still, last year, with the help of friends, I raised more funds for a scholarship. And so I really invite people into the program, regardless of, what you think about healing, what you think about, what you could lead, how you could lead people. Some people come in and they don't know, but I think it's the uncovering work. And from that, two people, to answer your question, two people who I'll just talk about as, what did they think? So in the community, one of my little sis, she is a beautiful mindfulness teacher and coach and yoga teacher. And she wanted to start her own business. She knew she wanted to start her own business during that time. And so after the Healing Arts Institute, she started that business. And I think what she says is that the Healing Arts Institute really helped her find her voice in that leadership, especially when you're coming into healing practices that are very white dominant still, to find your voice. And if you want to speak to, again, we have ownership over these practices as Black people. And so to dispel the myth that yoga's not for us, or that, there's no one who's practicing in ways that, will speak to us, is, that's part of what the participant I'm mentioning wanted to do, is to really address that. And so she wanted to find a way in, to that. And so using her music experience and her voice and all of the things that she already had, she came into that in the program, and is still on that journey now as she's in her business leadership. And so that's just one example. But I've had people come in who have, are not at all in connection with their bodies, but know that there's a nugget of something. It's just like having a spark of something that you're supposed to do something, and following that spark. Yeah. So another recent participant was that way. And, she really just has such fresh ideas now about what she wants to do in her life and in her sense of purpose. And so those are just, two examples of people who were very different, who came into this and really found something fresh for themselves as they went through the program.
Wow. You know, as I'm kind of listening to you speak, it even what you had mentioned earlier about the connection between mind and body, and one of the things that I've kind of mentioned on the show before is that trauma is one of the top things that disconnects the mind and the body. This sense of like what happened. It's just like this shock to the system, the mind, body, and spirit, that kind of people kind of come out of trauma in a lot of different places in a lot of different ways. But one of the most common things that can happen is this disconnect between mind and body. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if a lot of the work that you do are with people that have like identified trauma, because I know you also do individual as well as group. So tell me a little bit about how the work that you do, I guess, addresses the trauma that people hold in their bodies. Mm-hmm. Both identify, mm-hmm. For a lot of people, they'll come if they know they have an identified trauma, but some people may not even realize it until they start doing the work.
Exactly. Yeah, that happens a lot. So I always assume that there's trauma in the room. I think when we talked before, I talked about the New York Times quiz and study that came out a couple of years ago that talked about how many of us have had trauma before or by the age of 10, and it was something like 70%. And so I just assume that there's trauma, and definitely from my community engagement experience for so many years, working in a trauma sensitive way. That's how I work, regardless of what I'm doing and regardless of where I am, whether it's organizational work or individual or in community. And the way that I address it is, there's definitely a way that I leave space for people to have their experience and also to share in real time what that is. Somehow, again, it goes back to the circle. Sometimes when we're teaching and learning, we take in this kind of authoritarian kind of hierarchy of teacher-student mm-hmm. when we're in classes. And so we're afraid to speak up, or we're afraid to ask questions, or I make it so that it's a circle, and so that we are in conversation, even when it's me teaching something, that we are in conversation, so that when things come up, we can be in dialogue about it. And actually, I was just teaching a yoga class. I do many, many things, but, and I'll talk about the individual work in a second, but I teach yoga classes on Mondays and Fridays that are donation based. And somebody came into class and asked me about trauma that she was experiencing, and how I might address that with yoga, because what happens, as you said, with disassociation or disconnection from the body doesn't feel safe, and so to approach the body again, for me is like gradual, so I work with that gradual approach to the body. And yes, sometimes people don't know, again, because trauma could have happened before or by the age of 10. We might not know that we've had any level of trauma until we come to our body and start to realize that something's stored somewhere, and so when we awaken to that, it can be painful. People think that, oh, yoga and everything is just meditation, it's for everybody, and it always makes you feel good. Actually, it can be really challenging. Because all of those practices show you what is there. It shows you what is. And so it can be really challenging sometimes to come to that. And so the way that I really work with it, again, is leaving that space, leaving for people space for people to be in exchange with me, with us, about what's coming up. And so in real time, I can make changes and adjustments for how I'm holding the space and what I'm teaching and how I'm teaching to really speak to that, feel into that with that person or with people, that I'm not ever pathologizing the person. I pathologize the space, that we have grown up in this setting that is racist, and white supremacists, and that doesn't give enough infrastructure and support for mothers and for people who we have this just continual disparities across systems. I don't have to tell us. We know, those challenges. So the space is pathological, and so to be able to come to this place where we feel like I can be honest with myself about what I'm experiencing, because there's nothing wrong with me.
Yeah.
There's, it just is. And that there's this opportunity for us to come to the body for that information and for us to process it with support. And so, yeah, with the spiritual embodiment coaching, that's the intention is to help people reconnect with their bodies because of, the ways that we've been separated, or we separate ourselves intentionally, to come back, and then with support to try to start to uncover what is there. And I mean, yes, I've helped people move through challenge, but honestly, I help people reconnect with what is true about our being, that we are love, that we are, and like love is like the air that we breathe, and it's here. And that when we work with the layers of our bodies, which in the yogic, perspective, we have different layers of the body. We have the mental, the emotional, the physical, which we're very comfortable with and feel in contact with. But there are these subtler layers of the body, and the most subtle layer is the bliss body. So we are naturally blissful, but to come to that, there's a lot that we have to move through, and sometimes not sometimes, all the time, process in order to be able to feel into that, to feel into what's there.
And there's a question from Facebook from Sandra. Says she's been looking for a dance class or yoga class to join. Are you in the Boston area?
I am in the Boston. Well, I'm in Central Mass right now, but I am in the Boston area. I'm teaching virtually right now, but there are so many teachers. I want to shout out the Boston POC Yogi Facebook group. If you're interested in finding more classes that are live in the Boston area, please check out that group.
Boston POC.
Boston POC Yogis. So that's a yoga class, a yoga group that people will post their classes, and I know some people are live outdoors. And so if you're looking for that live community, which I definitely recommend, definitely go there. Dance classes. Last year when the pandemic started, a lot of the West African teachers that I've studied with, and they migrated outside to this park that's along the Charles River in Brighton. I don't know if this year people are back yet, but I think with the warmer weather, they probably are. And so you could start with the dance complex, which is in Cambridge. I'm not sure what kind of dance class you're looking for, but a lot of the West African and Afro-Caribbean teachers who teach throughout the city also teach at the dance complex. And so you'll see some of their names and schedules there. I want to shout out to one person I know who's teaching an outdoor dance class right now, Jean Apollon, Afro-Haitian Folkloric, which is happening outdoors in Cambridge at Magazine Beach Park. That's along Soldiers Field Road, Memorial Drive. So definitely check out that class that's happening now. Outdoors. He started back already. And I teach intermittently workshops, which used to be live, but right now they are virtual. So Mondays and Fridays, virtual yoga. I welcome you to join. And it's drop-in basis. So you can sign up once and then just drop in when you can. But although I do recommend it to anchor your week at least once a week, or, to bookend the week, Monday, Friday is really powerful.
And she says specifically African dance.
Yep.
And so if there is a link or more info, maybe what I can do is post it after, or if you know the link, I can put it in the chat.
Yep, definitely. The one I mentioned is Dance Complex, I believe dancecomplex.org, But I will look up some resources and we can post it after
Okay.
this time. Yeah.
Okay.
It's great.
Yeah. I would love to do West African dance as well. I used to spend a lot more time in the Cambridge area, and I always heard rumors that there was like drumming circles and different things going on. I was like, oh, I'd love to get into that, but I was working so much,
Yeah.
so it's just I couldn't fit it in. But it just seems like it'd be, again, that you mentioned earlier, that feeling of being at home in your body. I feel like it's something that would just feel really comfortable and be very enjoyable.
Yes.
You know.
Yes. I really highly recommend, even if you can only be a weekend warrior and do, your yoga class or your dance class on a weekend, I really recommend to. And even if you do it once a week, or even if you're dancing in your house and you put on that music that makes you feel the vitality, and you're dancing with yourself or you're by yourself or you're dancing with friends or family, it makes a difference. And you don't have to do it for an hour. A class is usually, a dance class is usually an hour to an hour and a half. Maybe you only dance for 5 minutes. The effects are cumulative of all of those practices. So you will get a benefit even if you do just a little bit. Yeah.
And I imagine too, because going back to something you said earlier about like the mind and brain kind of being prized over the body, kind of in that hierarchy. And I think when people start doing this kind of dance that is so freeing, such a use of their body, I imagine it kind of being liberating, because we're so constricted all the time. And particularly as Black people in a primarily white culture, sometimes our self-expression with our body is looked down upon. Like,
that's right.
You need to kind of like, you need to tone yourself down. You're being too loud. And that's both verbally, but also with our behaviors. And so we kind of learned over time to like make ourselves smaller. And I imagine that like with dance, it's like this place where you can just be.
Carryann, it doesn't matter where I am, where I've taught dance, and I've taught dance within corporations. Like I just did something in February for, one of the oldest private equity firms in the country. Doesn't matter if it's that, or whether I'm in community at the park. Everybody, the words that come out of everybody's mouths are joy, liberation, freedom, and feeling. Those are across the board, across anyone who I've practiced with. But honestly, that's why sovereignty is one of my first values, because to really be able to stand in, I love to move this body and I want to move. I dance outside a lot. I dance outside a lot, and people pass me and are like,
like, what's going on over there?
Right. Or maybe they feel compelled, like, oh, I wish I could do that. Who knows? But to do that and to really feel firm in who you are and how you want to express, that takes a level of ownership of your own experience that I certainly didn't come into until I was an adult and really committed myself to my healing and to our healing, to this work. But sovereignty is so important because, dance is liberating. And to be able to really own it, to own that you love it. I remember just a couple of days ago, it was International Dance Day, and I remember on Facebook, I just popped on, and Tito Jackson, who some of you may know, had posted, okay, I'm finally just saying it, I love dance. And I don't care who looks down upon it, who says that I shouldn't be like this, I should be more serious. It's exactly what you were talking about, that he was talking about, that he had felt compelled sometimes. And actually, I met Tito because he was on the board of Boston Ballet during my time there. And Tito and I then would start to run into each other at Daryl's. And, when Daryl's becomes the club after hours, I miss that right now. I really miss that. And the music would go on, and Tito and I would dance battle, we would saw each other.
We love a good dance battle.
I mean, but, this is definitely an issue of sovereignty when we can hold on to our liberating practices. It's what our ancestors had to do, right? So you talk about the drum and how drum was used for communication. Well, that's why they were forbidden. That's why they were forbidden during slave times, because the so-called slave masters knew that they were being used for communication that they couldn't understand. And so to come into, fully into, wait a minute, this is just like what my ancestors knew. This is communication, it's liberation, and to own it. Even if you feel, because I'm faced with a lot of people now who are like, but I don't know how to dance. I can't dance.
I was just going to ask you, who says that, well, I can't dance. What would you say to them?
No, I get a lot of people. First of all, I always used to like to tell people, wait a minute, that phrase, I can, having rhythm. Well, if you can have it, it's something you can get. You don't have to be, there's no sense of like this innate, born with this innately. No, I mean, you can get this, you can acquire this, you can have it. And even before having any structured rhythm or movement, you can just have whatever way that you move and accept it. I think it's the acceptance part that we don't really talk about, that we don't understand is hindering us from feeling like we can do something, whether it's like dance in public or that I can dance at all. Can you just accept how your body moves? And can you accept, go ahead.
I was going to say, if you can, because we're almost coming to a close.
Yeah.
Tell folks how they can reach you, like what's your website and your contact information, because I'm sure some people might be reaching out to you, even if it's to connect with you or to get more information. So how can they reach you?
Beautiful. So my website's in the middle of being redone because I realized there's so many dimensions to what I do. So don't get on my website and get confused and be like, but she was talking about all this other stuff. It's all one in my world, but I know it's hard to parse through. So the website right now is culturalfab.com. So that's like cultural fabric without the RIC. So culturalfab.com. My email is the same, contact@culturalfab.com. You can get in touch with me about meditation, mindfulness. I do, as I said, the yoga classes during the week. I will be starting a meditation group. Would love for you to join if you're interested in that. Dance, just be on the lookout for workshops. There will be a special day of healing that I'm going to be bringing forward that will be outdoors, in person. And so look out for that. I also do that work individually. So check out the spiritual embodiment coaching if that's something that sounded interesting to you. And then on the side of how I, sustain the work that I do, I also do work with organizations. And that work very much involves, mindfulness and movement in very different forms than what I do with individuals. So take a look at that. If there's any, I'm very passionate, especially right now during the pandemic, about stewarding the wellness of BIPOC within organizations, because I know, especially with all that's going on around racism, that we have been taxed within these organizations. And so that a lot of people are within companies and suffering. And so I'm working with different companies to really bring this body, mind awareness, knowledge, and healing into organizations for the benefit of Black folks and Indigenous and POC folks as well.
Oh, so guys, you heard it, culturalfab.com. She does work with organizations. So if you belong to an organization, you want her to come in and do some work, she'll do that. There's also groups, and there's the one-on-one spiritual embodiment coaching. And so I want to say the groups are not at no cost. The one-on-one embodiment coaching would have a reasonable rate. And of course, the corporate events would also be a paid kind of gig. And then contact@culturalfab.com is the email. So if you guys want to reach out to her, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. I think this is really great. I think we need to know where we can find this. As I told you before, like it's been on my mind. The dance, the Afro kind of Caribbean dance kind of thing. I think that would just be, even if it's like at a retreat or a conference or something like that. Just kind of having that experience, it's amazing. And so I want to thank you for bringing that to us. And I hope people will reach out to you and to connect with you. And folks that are listening, you've been listening to Black Mental Health Matters. I'm Dr. Drkerryann Williams, and my guest today was Melissa Alexis from Cultural Fab. And so you can tune in. Yeah, so you're welcome, and thank you for coming on the show. And you guys, if you want to tune in again next week, Black Mental Health Matters, Sundays at 1 p.m. on heat981fm.com. So I'll check in with you guys next week. Take care.
Well, I hope you guys enjoyed the show today. For more on Black mental health matters, you can go to my website, drkerryann.net, and you can tune in every Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on heat981fm.com. So take care.